Thanks for joining us today. Today's edition of Ask an Airstreamer is really unique. We get to hear from Kevin and Melanie, who have the unique perspective of having an Airstream touring coach and Airstream travel trailer. Before introducing Kevin and Melanie, I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Chris. In addition to being an Airstream owner myself, I get to work with Airstream's brand ambassadors, helping share their stories of adventure, curiosity, and exploration. Kevin and Melanie will share with us today how they use their Airstream Interstate and Caravel, how they travel with their family, the different uses for each vehicle, and more. We'll stop for questions along the way and have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. To submit your question at any point today, go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom of this screen. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions, but if we run out of time, we'll share an email address at the end to submit your questions. Before I turn it over to Kevin and Melanie, I want to call out three quick things. There are countless ways to use an Airstream Interstate and Airstream Caravel. And while Kevin and Melanie are going to share how they use their Airstreams, keep in mind that the options are almost limitless. Secondly, there's a 2-question survey that will pop up after we wrap up today. We'd love your feedback so we can learn what you like and things we can do better in future editions. And finally, at the end of today's session, we'll share a promo code for Airstream Supply Company, which is part magazine, part travel guide, and part outfitter. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Kevin and Melanie, Airstream ambassadors, Interstate owners, and Caravel owners. Guys, thanks for sharing part of your Saturday with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, I'm Melanie.
And I'm Kevin, and thank you for joining us. And we're officially marking ourselves safe from Hurricane Laura, and we're happy to have you join us today.
We live in Folsom, Louisiana, and we have 4 girls. We've had our Airstream Interstate since August 2015 and our Caravel since this past May.
And our life has changed like everybody else's with post-COVID world. And today we'll talk a little bit about how we used to use it pre-COVID and what's changed since then.
So Kevin and I have been married for 15 years. He is super outgoing, has never met a stranger, always up for an adventure. And honestly, I wouldn't have had half the experiences I've had if it wasn't for him pushing me to just get out there and do it and not, think too much about it.
And my wife is definitely the glue that holds us all together. We have a large family, and there's a lot of planning that goes along with that. And I'm my main navigator on the road. She's always looking for the next spots, roadside attractions, and we complement each other very well in that respect.
So we have had, like I said, our Interstate since 2015. We just got the Caravel. We started road tripping in an F-150 truck, and one time had a really bad experience not finding a place to stay, wound up in a really bad motel. As soon as we got home, we started looking at drivable
RVs.
RVs, thank you, sorry. Fell in love with the Airstream Interstate and traveled as much as we could get away. We had our 4th daughter in November 2017. Sorry, it looks like we're having a little technical difficulty with our video. And we ran out of space in the Interstate. So we looked at the options Airstream offered, and we fell in love with the Caravel, and all of a sudden we were back at it where we had room for everyone to sleep again. And here we are, that we tow our Caravel behind our Interstate.
So when we started with the Interstate, towing wasn't really even in my mind. We bought it mainly to have a hotel hopper is what we like to call it, a bathroom, a kitchen on the road. If we had to sleep in it, we could. But along the way, I started having needs to tow a trailer along the way, whether it was a car or a motorcycle. And everything I put behind it, it just pulled it. And the loads got a little bit bigger and heavier, and the trips got a little bit farther. And next thing you know, we were towing fully loaded through the Rocky Mountains, and it just worked. So that's kind of how, when we knew we wanted to get bigger with the Caravel behind it, it was a no-brainer. I knew the Interstate was up for the challenge.
And just a couple of questions coming in here, and I know you're going to dig into pros and cons of each, but just to set the scene a little bit, you've had the Interstate since 2015, is that right?
Correct.
And then the Caravel is the latest edition. You've towed all sorts of things with the Interstate.
Yes.
And then obviously most recently the edition with the Caravel. So as we go into the next slides, a couple questions coming in here, and I think about this in my own journey of, do I buy something motorized? Do I buy a travel trailer? If I buy something motorized, how big? So would love for you guys to dig into that in the next few slides in terms of pros and cons of each. And then I think a little bit of time on how you narrowed in on the Interstate.
Definitely. So I do actually get asked that question quite a bit since we own both. So with a large family, we have to kind of move a lot. We can't go to a destination and spend a week. We might be able to go to a destination and spend a day or two before we're on to the next destination. So when I give advice on towable versus motorized, if you're on the move and you need to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, the RV, the Interstate, is definitely the way to do it. If you're going to go somewhere and stay for any extended length of time, I suggest the camper, because it's going to be more comfortable when you get there. You're just not going to be able to cover the ground you would with the RV as comfortably as you could. So that's the easiest way for me to break it down, is to ask people what their main intentions would be.
Right. And for us, having 4 girls, it's ideal to have the restroom in the Interstate on the road, where we don't have to pull over every 30 minutes. If they need a snack, I have the microwave, I kick the generator on, I can feed them. We don't have to, we can cover a lot of ground in the Airstream Interstate.
And another thing was, when we bought the Interstate, it was to fill a void of not having a place to stay on the road. We knew we loved traveling across the country, but we just wanted to have our comforts of home with us. However, once we bought it, we started to realize all of these other uses for it, because it is small and easy to maneuver. It's not uncommon that my wife would pick up a ton of kids from school for a long weekend kind of a party, or we've used it at football tailgates, down here in New Orleans, Mardi Gras parades. It's proven to just be very versatile in that respect. It's kind of turned into a hybrid party bus for us.
Right. It's super easy to drive for as big as it is. I feel super comfortable taking it out by myself without Kevin, just like he said, to pick up kids from school in Carline when they have friends coming over. Because again, with 4 girls, I need the extra seats, and the kids think it's exciting when they get to take it for fun with their friends. But it definitely allows us to cover a lot more ground when we get on the road, that we have all those conveniences in the car with us, as opposed to just towing. So for us, it's been fantastic. Now the Caravel, I fell in love with Airstream's look, their color options, their cabinets, just everything's bright and uplifting. And the Caravel, for me, the space in the bathroom and the full cooktop, sink, and the counter space, and then the bed with the panoramic windows, I absolutely love. So we kind of have the best of both worlds, where when we're traveling on the road, I have everything I need to stay on the road and get to where we're going efficiently and quickly. But once we set up camp, the girls love the booth seating, and they can sit and hang out while I cook, or while I'm sitting on the bed, we can all have a space to just enjoy the views. So I was super excited when he had the idea to get another Airstream this past May, after, not being able to travel because we ran out of some space.
Definitely. The Caravel got us back out on the road. Without it, we would not have been able to do what we love to do, and that's travel on the road, because now we've actually added a child since we first bought the Interstate, with 4 children and 2 adults. It would have been a little cramped in the RV, to say the least. So the Caravel gave us just what we needed. We were looking mainly for a nice bed for ourselves, a full-size kitchen, and a full-size bath. The 23-foot Caravel offered all of that without being too cumbersome to pull on the road. We chose to stick with a single axle trailer, mainly just for maneuverability, and I did not want to get too far past the limits of towing capacity of the Interstate, because while on paper everything worked, you inevitably end up carrying more stuff than you anticipate along the way. So that's our logic to getting the 23-foot Caravel, and we've been very, very happy with it.
Question here regarding the Interstate is, how many, this is I think maybe a good segue for that overview slide that has the different Interstate models.
Sure.
But you guys have which one of these? I know yours is a few years old, but which model do you have, and specifically how many seats and seatbelts are in it?
Definitely. We have the 24 Grand Lounge, and ours is a 2015 version. It's very, very similar to that. Wheelbase, dual rear wheels. It seats 9 people. And what was the other part of his question?
It was really just, how many seats and how many seatbelts are in there for the one?
So it seats 9 legally and comfortably.
Right. So it's 5 in the very back, and then it's the 2 captain's chairs, and then the driver and passenger seats. So you're kind of split the front half and the back half.
Awesome. And that's, I think, a great segue just into this quick overview slide of a little bit into Airstream's product lineup when it comes to the Interstate line. So you have the 24 Ground Lounge and the 24 Ground Touring Edition. So obviously built in the same Mercedes-Benz chassis. From a spec standpoint, pretty much a lot of similarities. So solar is standard across all of Airstream's motorized products. Towing capacity is going to be the same on these Interstates across the board. Pre-wired for Airstream connected, so antenna is on the roof, and then you can just purchase the router and just plug it in. So a lot easier to get connected and stay connected when you're on the road. And then slightly different configurations when you start to look at the differences between the GL and the GT. So quick overview there, but I'll toss it back to you guys. And before I do that, or as I do that, Kevin, maybe a question for you. How large of a travel trailer can the Interstate tow? So we have a tow capacity here of 5,000 pounds. Off the top of your head, and I can do a quick search here while we're chatting. What model?
I've asked around. I've heard of people hauling up to 25s tandems behind it. Now they weren't. I don't know if they were going through the Rockies, going West Coast like we do. I believe it would do that, but you're really getting to the upper limit of the towing capacity because again, it comes down to gear. Empty curb weights it's okay, but the bigger the camper, you tend to pack more stuff with you. So that's the real trick to it.
Awesome. There was a question from Karen. I'm going to reply in the Q&A box with a link to a towing guide that basically lists some good definitions around the different terms when you're looking at tow vehicle compatibility, but it's also a handy chart that basically lists the weight of every Airstream. So easy to mix and match as you're figuring out what you need. So I'll toss it back to you guys.
All right, thank you. So I'll go ahead and take this little section here of towing. Safety is very important to me. I've been on the road many times with trailers of different types, and blowouts are the most common roadside issue that I've seen. Personally, it doesn't happen often to me. It still happens sometimes. I always make sure I'm traveling with fresh tires, properly inflated. But one of the biggest safety features I'm pushing for these days is sway control. I've looked around. There are many different types of sway products out there. Some of the lower end products use what they call friction control, and it's basically a connecting device between the trailer and the tow vehicle that just you bind it, and it'll help reduce the sway. But the problem is when the vehicle starts to sway, it doesn't self-correct. So that's led me down the road to this Blue Ox Sway Pro system, and it's kind of neat because by design it offers weight distributing and a self-correcting sway control built in. And having towed thousands of miles without it and then going to it, it was like night and day, because key to traveling many hours on the road is to have your anxiety level as low as possible. And that right there, because when you start getting out west, you'll get crosswinds, consistent 35, 45 mile an hour gusts. And it really just makes for a white knuckle experience. And I've learned to see the other vehicles on the road, and I know who has the good sway control and who doesn't, because the guys without it are really sweating as I'm passing them. But so that, and then another thing that I like is to keep an eye on my tire pressures. So we've installed a tire pressure monitoring system, and that lets us keep an eye on the pressures and the temperatures as well. We've towed 43,000 miles pretty much. Well, we have 43,000 miles on the RV, but almost all of that is towing. And we've been, go ahead.
We've towed small enclosed motorcycle trailers. We've towed car haulers, and now the Caravel. We've been as far south as Key West, Florida, all the way up to Glacier, Montana, and everywhere in between. We love the mountains. Southern Louisiana is, it's flat. We have lots of trees, so we don't get those big open sunsets and sunrises, which we absolutely love. Sorry again, it looks like we're having a little internet connection out here in the country with that video loading.
And it's just a preview for folks. I think that was just a point of view camera of you guys doing a cool drive somewhere.
It was.
Quick question on the towing piece, because I think it's, I when I first started towing my Airstream, I would say a vehicle that was probably a bit too small, and to hear you talk about those white knuckle experiences, it was a few times of that to remind myself, like, oh, this is supposed to be fun. And, arriving at my campsite stressed because we just drove a couple hours and it could have been better. So completely agree on that, that good experience when towing. Can you talk a little bit about the difference? Because you have this unique perspective of not having weight distribution and sway control for, a little while, and then adding that. What are some of the biggest things that you noticed when you added that in terms of the ride?
Okay, one thing that when I'd always hear weight distributing in the past, I'd always assume that the suspension on the tow vehicle wasn't strong enough to tow safely, so therefore the weight distributing helped alleviate that. What I guess I've learned is that it's not necessarily the strength of the suspension on the tow vehicle. It's all about equalizing the load across all axles evenly. So what weight distributing really does is it takes trailer weight, rear axle weight, and even the front axle weight of the vehicle and makes it more uniform. And that actually really improves the ride and the handling of the entire setup. When I would drive without it, you could see that, I always call it the tail wagging the dog, especially in a hard braking situation. The trailer will start to kind of, not jackknife, but kind of oscillate back and forth. And if your tow vehicle's not heavy enough, which the Interstate is, it can make for a really white knuckle experience because you're counter steering to offset that. With the weight distributing and sway control, it essentially ties everything in together and it moves as one unit. And like I said, it's anybody that has sway control, it's probably because they've towed without it and gotten into a really hairy situation and learned. It's a very cheap piece of insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks.
So we're lucky that Kevin has a flexible schedule. So whenever our kids are free, we can take off and get out of town. And I love that this way to travel lets us see so many things we wouldn't see if we were just hopping airport to airport to big cities to main attractions. We really do try, once we get out of town, to not take the interstate as much as possible. Take the old roads and the highways, and we've taken Route 66, and it's really fun to go see all of what's out there that sometimes you don't realize until you're just on the road. With having so many kids, which actually one of them's knocking on the door. I don't know how they found us out here.
I can't get away.
Ideally, a 6-7 hour travel day is about what they can handle. We have done longer days when where we live, we have a long way to drive before we actually start seeing the pretty views and things like that. So that's our target travel time with them. It also lets them kind of get out while it's still daylight and explore where we stop for the night. And it takes them about a day or so to settle in, but after that they get into their space and their routine, and we're good to go. I added a few little things. One of the things I guess I've learned is add just enough to make it homey and your own little touch, but just remember that everything you put out, you have to pack back up, and you want it secure, and you don't want to lose anything along the way. So, I did get a fun little travel map. The girls get to scratch off the states they've visited. I have a few little fake plants here and there. No glass. We have had things shift around on us and break, so that was a big, we'll not do that again. I love we collect pins from all their national parks and different adventures, and we have a little spot for their pictures, and just enough to make it homey and fun. One thing I do have that I didn't mention on here is the little suction cup hooks and all of the
Command strips.
Command strips are real easy, non-permanent ways to put. Now I hang a little hook for my towels and just little things to make it convenient inside while you're staying.
I love the on that previous slide. I'm just looking at the bottom right picture. Is that just the standard Airstream screen door with pins that you guys put through the holes?
Yeah,
It is.
that's what it is.
That's a really cool use of it.
Well,
Yeah. Ooh, you got it.
Now, I was gonna say we took it from another Airstreamer. We saw the idea and really liked it, so we started collecting pins. It's a great way to kind of display your conquests along the way. You know?
I love that. Yeah, it's a different take on the map that you see on so many Airstreamer stores.
Right.
A couple questions. I know we get into this with gear at the end, but a few questions coming in here about the tire pressure monitoring system.
Yes.
Specifically, is which one do you guys have? And I skipped ahead, and the pictures that we use are from one called Tire Minder. Is that what you guys use?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. So we do. I was gonna say it's a tire minder,
and then how you get the information, because I assume most tow vehicles have all of that built into it now, and passenger cars do, but trailers, most of them don't. There are a couple in Airstream's line. There's one in Airstream's line that does, but how do you get that information? How are you seeing it? What's the experience to see the tire pressure of the Caravel while you're towing it?
Definitely. So it is Tire Minder that we use, and it's I believe it's up to 10 tires it can monitor simultaneously. And it's very simple. They're a little, the sensors just screw on the valve stem caps, and they're very easy to pair with the monitor. There is a relay that they suggest you use, a signal boosting relay that goes halfway between the vehicle. And on the interstate, it's really easy because there's batteries. The coach batteries are in the right in the rear of it. So I mounted it underneath there, not permanently, just using zip ties, and it uses some simple alligator clips to power it up. And it relays the tire pressure and temperature. You can set the parameters to alert you. Typically, once you set the value, let's say you set it at 80%, 80 pounds, it's going to give you an alert if you go 10% over and under in either direction.
How do you see it, Joe?
Right. So the monitor is a handheld battery-powered device. It uses a micro USB, similar to most phones or devices, to charge, but it does not need to be plugged in to work. So they give you a little, like a gimbal mount with a magnet on the back, and you can kind of move it around as necessary. I keep it right to the right of my steering wheel where it's in the line of sight. And before I put that on there, I would routinely check in my rearview mirrors at least once a minute. And that sounds crazy excessive, but I probably was. So could you imagine doing that 9 hours day after day? It starts to wear on you. That was a huge weight off my shoulders, just not having to worry about that, because hauling, especially a tandem axle trailer behind your vehicle, typically you wouldn't know you had one flat until you had a double blowout. And then you're really in trouble because you typically only have one spare. So this is a huge peace of mind on the road.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, it's a good early warning system.
So one less thing to worry about, because last thing I want is, you're stuck on the side of the road with 4 kids.
Yeah. So what led us ultimately to making our initial purchase of the Interstate, we knew we wanted a Class B, and I really liked the Sprinter platform. There were a few other options out there, other manufacturers. One of them, it was definitely focused on price point. They were the cheapest entry-level Sprinter out there, but when I went inside, the fit and finish was just not there. And then there was another company out there with some really techie stuff, and they were pushing to not have a generator, and it was more of an inverter and batteries. But one thing I knew I wanted to do was Airstream offered a lot of real world experience. I mean, they've been doing it for 80 plus years, and there are often times we're 100 miles from civilization, and peace of mind is huge. When it's raining, it's 11:30 at night, and you just want to make sure you get to your destination.
Right.
So you want to go take this one, or?
Oh, some lessons, so many lessons. We're constantly learning new things on the road. I mean, even down to, when he asked me, where can we dump the camper,
tanks.
and you can look up online and you can find rest stops to make it convenient. Trying to think of some other things.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is you have to learn to be pretty resilient and resourceful. Sometimes it's better to not have too much of a rigid fixed plan, because then you're forced, if you run behind schedule and I've seen people plan day after day after day. Well, I just worry about getting to the next point.
Right. But, speaking of planning, I started off looking at a general map with a general direction of where we want to go. I use a couple of different apps, Google Road Trippers, Harvest Hosts. So I like Road Trippers because I can enter in our starting point and an idea of where I want to end. I can check the mileage for the day, knowing about how many hours that's going to take us to travel, to help me figure out where to go. Harvest Host is another app that I can look in the general direction that we're heading, and it's another option instead of a campground. So it's a membership fee, but it lets you get some really cool experiences. We got to stay at an alpaca farm, and the kids got to go feed them and tour, their setup. So Harvest Host is another great way to plan, just, for off the beaten path places. I like alternating between full hookups with the kids, having power, water, and then like a boondock night. I'm good at the back and forth, with all the kids. It's a nice break to get out and not have anyone around you, and just, the views and things like that, and then balance that out with some electricity and some water to get showers and everything done.
Yeah. A couple of cool options there on the Road Trippers that I like about it is it's really neat because you can say, all right, we are in Fort Lauderdale and we want to drive to Atlanta, and it does two cool things that I really like. It does exactly what you're talking about, where you can say, I actually want to avoid these type of roads. I want to avoid interstates and highways and take smaller roads, but it gives you all of these options along your way of things to do and see. So it's really
great.
Yeah, you can find the cool stuff with that, which is really neat.
And I like you can filter if you're only looking at that moment for random roadside attractions, or if you're trying to find a restaurant, or you're trying to find something specific, you can filter that on top of your map. And I know this may come up later, but like Kevin has always reminded me, pull up your map before you head out in case you lose signal, that your GPS is set with at least your end point. And then as I go in and out of signal, I can search on my apps with Road Trippers and whatnot, and kind of navigate us if, we wanted to stop and break things up. But we always have the map going when we have a signal, because that sometimes will get tricky, that you're in the middle of nowhere, and if it's not ready to go, you kind of will get stuck sometimes. So conservation with water and power, you kind of learn to keep an eye on your tanks. And when you have so many kids that do need to shower and things, like I kind of mentioned before, by not boondocking for super long periods of time with the kids, we're pretty good between the two vehicles at monitoring our water and making sure, that we don't run through it too quickly. On nights that we're not connected to full hookups and full power, I use the paper plates, and I don't wash a lot of dishes, knowing that if we have to take really quick showers, we'll be good. Kevin's going to look for more information on the generator side of that.
Yeah, sure. So just not knowing where the next fill up might be on propane or whatnot, we don't run the generator nonstop. The most we'll use it is if we're traveling in the hottest of weather. The RVs, basically the air conditioner for the front half of the RV is enough to typically keep it comfortable, except when you're getting around 100 degrees or higher, which is pretty common in the Southwest. So we'll cycle the generator. We'll run it for 20 to 30 minutes, drop the temperature down, shut it off, and on and off like that. And that's another reason when we're traveling in hotter areas like that, we'll look for places with hookups for the night. So we do have air conditioning. But the plus side too is that the coach batteries and the Caravel batteries do charge from the alternator on the RV. So when you're traveling 4 or 5 hours or more in a day, even if your batteries were 80-90% drained, you can pretty much get them back topped off before your next stop if you were boondocking.
Right. And we really do try and plan when we boondock to try and get somewhere either, with some altitude or some good weather, so that we can take advantage of just, staying quiet and opening the windows and just enjoying the weather. So, you know, the further south we are, we tend to stay in a campground and take advantage of the hookups and everything like that. Sometimes when we're driving, I will kick on the air, run the microwave, make some popcorn. If it's really hot, run the generator long enough in the interstate to turn the back AC on for the kids. And usually after a little while, I can turn it off and it keeps temperature. So like he said, we try not to constantly rely on a generator, but we just kind of, you know.
And I do bring a redundant generator only when I have the Caravel in tow, and I use that Honda EU inverter generator. It's pretty popular. A lot of people use them. I like it, one, because it's quiet, super quiet, and fuel efficient, and two, it stores really easily behind the propane tanks between that and the camper. So it's not a big deal to bring, and I have a secondary power source if we're boondocking. In theory, I haven't done it, but I should also be able to run the generator on the coach and plug the camper into it. And it would be an either or scenario, but I should be able to run the air conditioner in the camper as long as I don't run the air conditioner in the RV. So that is another option.
Couple technical questions about energy system. And I guess this would apply for both the Interstate and the Caravel. Talk a little bit about how you monitor your kind of battery state and battery usage in each of those vehicles.
Definitely. So the battery system it's really not a whole lot of monitoring if you're traveling, because they're getting topped off so often. And the RV has the solar trickle charger built in on the roof as well. You almost become intuitive with it. You know when your batteries are running low. If you've been unplugged and not running for a day or so or more, sometimes I'll just start the RV up and let it kind of charge the batteries, even if they're not going anywhere. It'll charge them pretty quick. But there's a battery a test gauge on both units, so you can easily just push a button and see where your percentage remaining and voltages are. But again, like I said, it's for us, since we don't sit in one place for a long time, it's really not a big issue.
And then how many batteries are in the Interstate, specifically the house batteries?
Definitely. So the Interstate technically it has 4 batteries. It has 2 for the engine and starting system of the RV, of the chassis, and there are 2 batteries for the house batteries. And those are, since they're mounted, they're actually mounted sideways underneath it, they are AGM, which is absorbed glass mat batteries, deep cycle, and they can be mounted in any position. So they're maintenance free. So you basically, they just charge on their own, and there's no topping off with water or whatnot on there. And in the camper, there are 2 deep cycle batteries that I believe are lead acid that you would maintain with distilled water.
Awesome. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, a few things we always travel with. I fell in love with some rocking folding chairs. I make sure we always bring those with us. I kind of laughed the first time Kevin talked about dragging the little mini green egg with us, but it's been fantastic. You know, it's one of those luxury things. You kind of prioritize what you really want with you and learn to narrow down how much to pack. Obviously he always travels with a toolkit so that he can handle minor things that come up along the way. We always bring a folding table, sometimes bring fishing poles for the kids, just depending on, where we're going and what we think we're going to get into. I do like to bring a throw rug for out under the canopy, just for the kids to have an actual little spot. The emu is another fun thing to bring when the trees all align, and, it's a fun little escape.
So do you want to take the cooking as well? I can do a little.
Yeah.
I'll start talking about the green egg,
Yeah, sure.
kind of to tie it into what we were saying earlier. I'm a fan of grilling, like most guys are, and green egg product is just a very versatile product. There are many other ceramic type cookers out there. I just liked it because it had a lot of accessories, and it's almost a whole lifestyle like there are with Airstreams around green egg cooking. And we take everything from pizza stones to little Apple dessert devices where we can cook. You could pretty much cook every meal you wanted to on it with a Dutch oven and whatnot. But that's just my luxury item, I guess you could say, because after driving all day, I like to kick back and have a cocktail and do some grilling.
Which is nice for me that he can handle the main dish outside, and then I have 3 burners inside that I can handle sides. I have a microwave / convection oven / air fryer / I'm still figuring out all of the things that it does, but it's great. You know, I know I mentioned this earlier, with whether you're boondocking or on water hookups will determine whether I'm bringing out a real set of plates, and when I say real, they're not, you know, they're not breakable, or using the paper. I do try and plan the food storage as far as we have 2 fridges between the 2 units. So I tend to put more lunch items and snacks in the Interstate and more dinner and breakfast items in the Caravel to kind of break up, knowing where I will be when I'm cooking each meal. That way when we stop midday, I don't necessarily have to get into the Caravel to be able to feed them lunch, because sometimes we'll just pull over in a nice little lookout kind of area. You know, we're mindful of how much we pack, knowing, you know, after a couple of trips, you kind of get into a routine and you have your favorite things you like to use. And I find that, like every trip, we overpack. So we really try and think through, you know, we bring our Yeti that we use in the morning for coffee, and we do wash those, and then we use them again in the evening, just to maximize our storage space. We do have a set of nesting pots, which are great. The handle comes off for easy storage. I've found a collapsible colander. There's a lot of great things out there you can research as far as space-saving items. But those are just, you know, some suggestions. Cooking the least amount of ingredients that'll still taste great is easy. You know, 5-ingredient recipes, things like that. I have a lot of things I've just found on the internet after exploring just simple things to cook. The Caravel has a closet that I decided to use for pantry storage instead. I do suggest the more you can contain your items, the better. It's inevitable you're going to wind up on a road, you're going to take a turn, you're going to hit some potholes, and we're doing this, and all I can think of is everything all over the floor. So we did a little shelving system. I did include some baskets and hanging bags, and, you know, tension rods would probably be great at the top to hold all the plates and things. Drawer liner keeps them from sliding, but again, the more, I probably should do baskets along the top as well. We're still experimenting and figuring things out. I do like in the bathroom, little bins just to hold things. Again, as things slide, at least your whole bin slides and your stuff's not flying. You know, I found with 6 of us, we would need so many towels, and we had these Turkish towels I used at the pool. Well, I started looking at them and realizing how flat they fold, and I can pack 12 to 15 towels in that one space in the bathroom, and all of a sudden I can relax a little bit. I don't have to stress out about making sure I go wash clothes every day. I pack about enough for a week for us, knowing that, you know, again, I don't have the pressure of, if I don't wash clothes tomorrow, we're out. There are 4 Tupperware bins under the Caravel bed, which is great. I store 2 of the kids, the little ones' clothes plus my clothes. My older kids can handle a duffel bag and get it in and out on their own, and they keep that in the Airstream Interstate. I do like packing cubes inside the Tupperwares. Anything you can do just to stay organized and you can see everything. And, you know, the more you can kind of keep things in their places and keep your space clear, I find it just, at least for me, it just helps me, you know, have a better, a peaceful trip. I do kind of, you know, and you'll all figure out your own little rhythm and routine. I like at night, before I set up any beds, to pull out the Tupperwares, get the girls' pajamas out and their outfits for the next day. That way, once those Tupperwares are up, I'm only going in them the next night. Because once you have your table pushed down, which the little dinette turns into a table, you know, once that's set up as a bed, it's just sometimes easier not to have to get back into all the clothes storage. So, you know, that routine, again, it's about a day or so of remembering, okay, well, if I get this out now, it's less stress later. But again, you know, it's just something you kind of figure out. Little plastic storage bins, things like that have been just great. I do suggest, and this is one thing I've forgotten several times, is some kind of tote or folding laundry basket. One, you can, when you're first traveling, you can keep items in it that you don't want moving around. But we wind up with dirty clothes that I look around and realize I don't have anywhere to store or anything to carry them to wash. You know, I wind up using grocery bags sometimes. So that's something that I think would be helpful to keep in here for next time. Connection issues we've had, like we mentioned earlier, load your map before you head out. If you have small kids, I've found it super helpful. Don't rely on always having internet service. If they're streaming something, they're going to get upset when you lose connection. So I do buy things ahead of time as far as like a series of a show or a movie, well, a couple of movies, so I know that the younger ones can have something consistently on their device ready to go.
And another thing we've learned too is you let them stream away, and then you'll get home and you'll get your bill in, and you might have an unlimited plan, I don't know, but we've had some pretty expensive bills, so we found it was cheaper to download, rent, or buy some videos or movies ahead of time.
Right.
And even if you do have unlimited, which we do now, they tend to choke you down, obviously, when you hit a certain cap. And it's not fun being on the road for 3 weeks when you've used your data up in the first 2 days. So,
and as far as staying connected, if I know we're about to go through an area where we're going to be out of service for several hours, I will kind of shoot texts here and there to family and say, hey, this is where we are. I won't have signal for, you know, this amount of time. And as soon as I get to where I'm going, you know, we'll let you know. Because I do like that people kind of have an idea of why they can't get us, or, you know, where we're going to be if there's, you know, any kind of problem. But you know, the kids always have something to do, and it's worked out for us so far. Let's see.
Yeah, so some budgeting tips. When we go, we typically are gone 2 weeks to a month. Obviously, staple items, they're going to go bad at home anyway, so we try and pack as much of that as we can. And we try not to buy, we try to, you're limited on storage space, especially fresh food storage space. So we hit a grocery store every 2 to 3 days tops, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of go along the way.
Again, that's partly because of the size of our family. I can't really carry more than a couple of days worth of meals with us, just because we're limited on space, and you know, 4 kids go through a decent amount of food. But like he said, we will bring the basics with us from our house already. You know, spices, olive oil, pasta, rice, stuff like that. So we're not just going and buying duplicates of everything. I do try and plan out, you know, simple meals and make sure that I have, you know, ideas of what I'm getting into, instead of just going into the store and then coming into the camper and RV with bags and bags of food. I try not to bring my kids to the store if I can avoid it, because we'll wind up with, you know, all kinds of fun stuff. I did sign up for the KOA app because you do get points when you book through them. You get a discounted rate with your account number. You know, little things like that to try and save here and there. Depending on how long we're going to stay at a campsite will determine also which level of campsite I book, because they all have different prices. You know, so if I know we're going to be there a couple days and the kids are going to want to hang out there and relax a little bit and the views are great, we'll kind of, you know, sometimes we'll spring for the site that has the extra space or the swing and things like that. And otherwise, if you know you're going to be kind of blowing in and out, the basic site's all you need for your hookups, and it's no big deal. Okay, traveling with kids, I'd like them to all have a bag with things to do. Bring their headphones, their iPads, their books, their coloring pages, you know, even, you know, the younger one will wear her little headphones. I like them to have it in their own bag so that as they have it out during the day, they know when we stop, okay, the bed has to come out, the walkways need to be clear. And they really do get into the routine of they'll put it all back in their backpack, and they know that needs to be out the way. You know, things like that. I know I mentioned about the clothes. The more organized, the better, you know, experience, in my opinion, that you'll have. That, you know, it's fun. It's an adventure. The kids love it. When they see it, they're ready to go. So they, you know, they settle in, and like I said, organization's key. But it's a ball.
All right. So,
quick question on kids and traveling and planning. how often are the kids part of that process? Like, do you guys pull them in early on and play a version of, spin the globe and say, where do you guys want to go? Or is it, hey, we're thinking about this area. What do we want to do when we get there? What's that look like?
We usually have an end goal where we want to wind up, and they get really excited because they can kind of see the states they haven't been through, and they get excited because they know that they'll get to take them off their map, kind of thing. They've never really.
They've pretty much been going with the flow.
I was going to say they're pretty used to the two of us kind of say, hey, we're going here, and this is where we think we're going to stop, and they're always on board. And I don't know if it's because we've always planned it for them that.
No, I think the adventures are so out of the ordinary that we could tell them what we were doing, but it wouldn't register until they do it. But they always have a good time.
Well, and they're always up for anything.
Yeah.
So we just enjoy getting on the road.
Yeah.
So, and maybe as they all get, our older two could really sit down and plan with us. But, and maybe as they all get a little bit older, they'll have more opinions. But so far, they've.
And one other thing that I've
us.
learned too, people say, man, you go to all these great places, but you don't really stay enough to kind of see everything. And the answer is no, I don't. What I've found is that my children love to go and see something new, but they don't want to necessarily spend a week there. So we typically, I call it the drive-by, like if you've watched Vacation with Chevy Chase when they stare at the Grand Canyon for all of 3 minutes. Sometimes that's all we get a chance to do, but I think looking back, the children will be, all they will remember is that they were there, and that it'll be the memory that sticks.
That's partly because of the age spread in our kids, that what the older ones can do, the younger ones can't really do yet. So we can't really get into a lot of the big hikes or the horseback riding trails or the whitewater rafting, because we do have two younger kids that would have to be left out. So we try and balance exposing them to as much as possible, but making it a pleasant experience for all of them, where we're not leaving anyone out of the experience. So, they can say they've been there. And what's really cool for me is we've shown them a lot of different places. And once they go to school, they'll come home and they'll say, hey, we had our textbook open in history and they were talking about something and I've seen it. They went to Mount Rushmore. They've seen the Grand Canyon. They've seen the Alamo, all these different places that they learn about in school. They can say, I've been there. Even if they didn't get to stay for days and days, they can say, I know what that is.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So just some takeaways just from having many miles out there on the road. We kind of touched on it earlier for some safety tips. And I'll be first to say I don't have a backup, but a secondary source of communication is something I really need to look into getting, whether it's a CB radio or a satellite phone, because it's not uncommon. We will go through 2 to 3 hour stretches of little to no cell service. So sometimes I'm keeping my fingers crossed when we're going through these voids, but fortunately we've never really had an issue. But that would definitely be a recommendation for someone, because we take our technology for granted because we're used to being in relatively urban areas. But when you start getting rural, it goes away, and it goes away really, really quick. Another thing is tires. Back to, I can't stress tire safety enough. People they're expensive, and people want to get the most mileage out of their tires. The problem with these types of vehicles, even the RV, they tend to sit and age more than you're actually going to wear the tires out. So they have date codes on them. I think Department of Transportation recommends tires 6 years or older be replaced. But you've got to just be mindful of that, because that date will come and go really quick. So spend the money, keep your tires properly inflated, and keep them fresh. We also carry things in Louisiana. It's not an issue, but we have to remind ourselves we carry bear spray with us, because we might be in Louisiana today, but in 2 days we could be somewhere that there's issues with bears.
Doing basics like bug spray, bug bite medicine, Tylenol, Tums, Pepto, things that you would just need all the time to have on hand. Band-aids, antiseptic, your basic first aid kits. You just never know. You're on a trail, somebody falls, you're in the middle of nowhere. You want to be able to handle minor things, things like that.
So what advice do we have for new owners? A lot of people see what we post, and the immediate response is, that's awesome, I want to go do it. And I'm not discouraging that. I actually am encouraging people to do that. But then I also find that a lot of people immediately, when they jump in head first, they immediately get overwhelmed. And just a quick little story. I had a friend of ours loved our lifestyle, and they bought an Airstream Interstate just like we did, and took it out from Louisiana. The next morning I called to check in on him, and he was all bummed out. He was pulling in to a rest for the night. It was about 11 o'clock at night. Someone pulled out in front of him, and they had an accident and totaled out the RV. Fortunately, everyone was perfectly fine, but that was the end of their trip. And he was so distraught. He didn't want to see an RV ever again. And I told him, I said, no, I said, you're going to turn around, you're going to go back to Dallas, and you're going to rent an RV, and you're going to press on. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you've got to get back on that horse. If you don't do that, you will remember, it will be the worst memory of your life. And he did. He went on to rent an RV, and he called me up thanking me. He said, thank you for, when I was in my lowest time, to help me see through that, because it is an adventure, and it's not as simple as jumping on a cruise or going to Disney World. But when you get through this, you will have memories, and you'll be so proud of what you and your family have done. It'll make you just want to do it more and more and more. So it is definitely a fun adventure. And you just got to go into it, like I said, with an open mind, that things will not always go according to plan. It could be weather related, it could be vehicle related, it could just be, there's all types of adverse conditions. So especially with COVID too, you just don't know what life's going to throw at you from one day to the next. You just have to be ready to roll with the punches on it.
And something I wanted to mention before with the whole safety thing, I know we mentioned that we wound up with the Caravel so that we could have space to sleep our whole family. So when we're split between the two vehicles, we do keep them connected, because we at that point can feel if there's any motion, and if someone's moving around, which lets us know, okay, well, you can call the other one and make sure that was them and that there's no other issue. We do keep the key. If we have our older kids sometimes that will sleep in the Airstream, and we'll keep the younger two in the Caravel. So I will keep the key for the Interstate on me so that I can get in and out. Now, we get them set up, we put the shades down, we lock the door, they have cell phones, and like he said, it'd probably be smart for us to get some kind of
two-way
even
radios,
walkie-talkies for the two units. But we have, it's worked out for us. We do not park in a place I don't feel safe and split anybody up. I make sure that I'm completely comfortable with where we are and that it's a safe place. Now, when Kevin travels alone, it's easier for him to pick and choose and just kind of not plan as far ahead. But I feel safe knowing that when we keep the two connected, and I know when they're awake, I know when they go to sleep, and I know that just gives me peace of mind. Since we have so many in our family, we can't all sleep in the same unit. So that's just another little piece of safety that to throw in.
Couple of questions related to that. Before you guys got the Caravel, were you able to sleep the whole family in the Interstate, or was?
So we got the Interstate in 2015. At that point in time, our kids were obviously smaller. We had 3 in there. So we could sleep, some of us, we would just all pile in the bed. I did have some that were small enough where we would bring sleeping bags and they could sleep on the floor. I know there are new devices that you can put like a mattress kind of topper in the front seats to make some more sleeping space. And it really was when our oldest 2 were my height that I couldn't throw them on the floor comfortably anymore.
And some nights we would, if it was a nice area, we would bring a tent, and they would have a camping experience, and it would open up some room in the Interstate.
But there were definitely several years that we did travel with 5 of us there when they were smaller. Yeah. For sure.
I travel a lot alone in the RV, in the Interstate, and one person in the Interstate, it's like a mansion. A couple is perfectly fine. 3, you can do 3, but that's just kind of an odd number. I mean, unless you have just one child and you're sharing the bed. But
the rear bed is large.
It is. It's a full queen bed.
Definitely fit small children in the bed with you.
But but when the 4th one came along and the older 2 grew up to be full-size adults, we knew that it was all right. It was time to add on to the RV.
Got it. That's great explanation. Similar one when it comes to those two vehicles. So let's say you're going to be somewhere for a couple days and you're going to leave the Caravel to kind of go explore a bit. How do you secure the Caravel so it's there when you get back?
Typically, we have a tongue lock for the trailer tongue, and if you're leaving it set up with the jacks down and it's plugged in, one thing I like about camping is you have a lot of honorable people out there, and people tend to look out for one another, and it's not uncommon. We make a lot of friends where we go. So especially
other Airstreamers.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of all
recongregate,
flock together, and as soon as you see one, they're coming over, they're introducing themselves, they're saying hello. So it's a really great community. We've met a lot of people, and with the internet now, with all the social media, we've kept up with a lot of them that, you know, years ago you wouldn't get to follow along with their adventures.
Yeah. But basically we just lock it down, and you know, and we don't normally go too far away. It might be for the afternoon or most of the day.
But it is nice that we can leave the Caravel in the campground and we can jump in the interstate just like a regular vehicle, and whether we're going somewhere in a town and we need to park it in a parking lot, or we're going out in the mountains to adventure, it works both ways. We can park it no problem, you know, to run into a restaurant or a store or whatever, and then it's, you know,
so
it's very versatile.
One thing that I've kind of learned is to kind of game the system a little bit. When you go to some of the popular places, whether it's Yellowstone or these national parks, there's typically dedicated parking for RVs, buses, and whatnot. And in that case, I'll jump right in and take one of those spots. But sometimes it's the other way around. There's no parking for RVs, but you'll find a spot for a regular vehicle. And you know what? I can back it right on in and park with a Prius next to me. It's not a problem. So that's not something that just any RV can do.
Yeah, that's the best of both worlds. That's great.
It is. It really is.
One of the theme that's run through everything that you guys have talked about today is the ability to travel with the comforts of home. One of those is, you know, for some folks is definitely a hair dryer. So have you guys tried to use a hair dryer? Any issues in either vehicle with that? No?
You have? We have.
You know, if obviously when you're connected to full hookups, you're totally fine using it. And then I'm trying to remember.
We have an iron. We have an iron as well.
I use a flat iron and a hair dryer, and I don't remember you having to kick a generator on for those.
No, so typically, the Interstate has a 5,000 watt inverter, I believe. Is it 5,000? Maybe it's 15,000. I don't know. I know this. If I were to use a hair dryer or a flat iron or even the coffee pot, I would prefer to be running on the generator. Sometimes the inverter will handle it, but it will drain the batteries pretty quickly. And normally one of the others readily available, the generator or campsite power. So it's not normally a question.
And we do kind of time, especially with having all girls, I make sure that they wash their hair and dry it when I know we're connected to power. If I know the next night or two we may not be. So I do kind of think about things like that. But the only issue I think we've ever run into is not being able to use the convection microwave on a smaller generator. Other than that, I've never run into an issue with just one hair dryer running. And again, you know, when we're not connected to power, we're trying to stay somewhere cool. So I wouldn't necessarily have the air condition running at the same time. So it's just figuring out, you know, how much you can handle.
It's interesting that you brought that up. One of the most common questions that people have around specifically boondocking, so going somewhere and not being connected, is how can I be comfortable? And the theme that's throughout all that is really around picking the right place at the right time of year.
Southern Louisiana is not where you want to boondock.
Not in August.
Unless it's about December.
Yeah.
But no, we definitely take into account what the temperature will be and where we're going to stay. And if we're somewhere where we know we're going to have a breeze and it's going to be cool and it's not going to be raining. And I know that kind of comes up and you can't necessarily always plan for weather, but we do keep that in mind before we pick, you know, power versus no power.
Yep.
Awesome. One final question, and just while we ask it, a reminder to folks that this is the promo code for Airstream Supply Company that we talked about at the beginning. So that's on the screen now. But the final question is, when you think about driving, a big part of the experience is the actual, you know, drive itself, or it can be. Any favorite cross-country routes? Specifically, Linda's asking, they're thinking about going the northern route from Maine to Colorado, or maybe all the way to Washington. Any beautiful stretches of the country where the drive has just been spectacular?
Definitely. So we're coming from Louisiana, so we're always coming from the south, but we've taken multiple routes out west. Our favorite place that we've always gone is the Southwest, and there are multiple roads. I mean, you always hear about Route 66, but Route 66 is just one of many roads. So once you start heading out into New Mexico, Southwest Colorado, Utah, Arizona, all those areas, it's just my favorite. And there's so many things. We've like been going out there for 5 years, and we still find new things. I mean, the kids have done everything from stand on the corner of Winslow, Arizona. We've been down to Marfa, Texas to see the Prada display on the Mexico border.
The four corners they've laid down there.
Four corners.
Pictures,
Yeah, I mean, like, again, Road Tripper helps out with all that, but that's definitely my favorite area. And the other reason is because I do like to drive. It's just so open. It's not crowded. It's a very enjoyable trip for me. I do love the East Coast, and I was up there a few weeks ago, but you just have a lot more traffic on the roads, and the back roads are scenic, but they're a lot slower, I guess, than out west. Because out west, the back roads are the roads. Even though they're not the interstate, they're 75-mile-an-hour roads.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. This has been great. And that's the time that we have for today. If we didn't get a chance to get your question, or if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can send them to hello@airstream.com. That's HELLO@airstream.com. And thanks everyone for spending part of your Saturday with us. And please take a moment to give us your feedback on the next screen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.